everybody.
Morning.
How is everybody doing this morning?
Good. Good.
Is anybody new here, first time, or new to spiritualism? Please point your hand.
First time.
Okay, fantastic. And the reason there is more to discover as we go on further. Something new and something bright always comes along in one of occasions of gathering, and if you have your own version of gathering in your life and experiences before, there's always something more there. But we are standing or sitting in a place where spiritualism is the mainstay, where we have an understanding or a desire to explore the continuity of life. So, it has been a long time since I worked with notes, and I have notes today. So you'll have to be as patient with me as I'm going to be with myself. Just have that awareness. So the title that we will work around is the concept of life after death. And we will just go through some things. There's going to be a place and point where I want all of us to recognize how this information pertains to us in our own unique way, rather than what I have to say from my journey and so forth. So the universal curiosity or the cultural perspective on life after death is exploring why that happens, where we call the life goes on after death. Death meaning the physical change. But there are other connotations of death, because there is definitely more to be discovered, and we will work with that there. Now, there are many religions and cultures that have construct of life after death, and in the upcoming moments we'll talk about that. Different culture also approach this differently. My upbringing has been in India, where there are numerous amount of religions, and there are religions within religions and so forth, and everybody differs slightly different. There are only few in my experience have I have come to understand that have a precepts of preparation before the aspect of transition, and then preparation of what goes on after the death. But there are only very few religions that kind of approach it in that manner. Mostly it is just a transitional place, and then there's belief system is there. So we'll go with some major religions and then spiritualism as well, and this is not by stretch of saying is one is better than the other. It is just a comparative, simple-minded expression is here. As you understand, the religion of Christianity believes in the heaven, hell, purgatory, and so forth. That purgatory being the destination for the soul based on the physical earthly actions, and then we have to go through that. There's also a concept of resurrection and eternal life. Once again, it is within the construct of the action-based lifestyle. The religion of Islam also dictates that afterlife and the day of the judgment, that is a connected, which in equation, it runs like when we die, we will get assessed on our actions and deeds and our participation in life, and we get designated where we go from there, and so forth. So that is there. In the Islamic religion, there is also a little construct of saying there is heaven and hell is there, so that is there. And I'm really keeping it very short, because these can be a subject of conversation in detail on its own, so I chose to just keep to the point here. In the religion of Hinduism is reincarnation, and once again it is based on the law of karma, law of action, based on how that is. That's where you get to decide for yourself, you want to go upscale or you want to downscale your life choices in reincarnation model. In spiritualism, reincarnation is slightly touchy and controversial subject, but that is to be probably addressed later on. Now, Hinduism and other similar religions in that capacity do believe that we can break the cycle of life and death, incarnation and reincarnation, and then moving on to an extremely higher plane where there's no need to return to any earthbound life choices is there. So that is there, which is also called as moksha or liberation. In the English terminology, it could be the salvation of the soul, or you're transcending your space, so that space is there. In the religion of Buddhism, similar to the Hinduism religion, is the birth and the cycle of the samsara, the action-based life. Same precept is what you sow is what you reap, and based on that you go up and down in the scale. Their version of liberation is the nirvana, or which is saying you break the cycle of suffering. This is considered as a place of suffering in that aspect, so we're breaking that cycle. Now coming to spiritualism as that observation, it talks about the continuity of soul and its journey into the other side. And that is there. The other aspect of spiritualism does introduce us to the communication with spirit, with information, emotions, evidence, and so forth. So that aspect is there. As you were reading your principles, you would have read somewhere along the line says, there is doorway to reformation is open to all souls, here and hereafter. And that is the concept of progressive spiritual development of the soul, not the physical body at that point. And that sometimes it gets become a little ambiguous space to understand what does this mean, as joy is doing that, or that the soul that is embodying joy at this time. That's the progression there. So it's kind of close and interchangeable, but that is the perspective of understanding what is happening after death. So, there's also a underlying understanding in spiritualism is there is no purgatory. You move on and you have the opportunity to correct whatever you need to correct or work on, taking time on the review of systems and so forth. So there's another part of that there. Now in philosophical views of life after death, what is going on at that point is there's dualism versus materialism. And the part of that is whether the consciousness can independently exist without body. There's a little mixed part of the thought is there. If the consciousness can independently exist without body. The other aspect of that is the concept of personal identity after death. And that's a vast subject of discussion once again in its own right. And these are just pointers to understand where your contemplative thought can lead you, what is going on the other side. Especially after we're surrendering and releasing this body and moving on to that spiritual fulcrum of our life, etc. So I will not give you my personal dissertation, but that's something to allow you to just simmer on that. Now, the scientific studies within the aspect of life after death is something where it becomes interesting because the NDE studies, near-death experience studies, are an active part of the process. And one of our leading authors still living and working on probably the next publication at this time, Dr. Raymond Moody. He has done several research and studies and samples, etc., of what happens there. And last year I had a pleasure of being in one of his week-long workshops, and I do take away from that that he's preparing another publication more than what he has already contributed there. So that is there to what happens in the near-death process, the commonalities, the implications, the effects, and so forth. And more than that. Then there's conscious studies that also work on exploring as to how and what of consciousness. Like we were talking earlier, what happens to consciousness? Does it stay or does it dissipate? And that's the part of the conscious study group is to establish that parameter, what's going on. And that's also sample sizes and research-based edifices that they provide. The third aspect of the scientific study is the paranormal research. We all get excited about ghosts and spirits and hauntings and so forth. There's a lot of whole segment of life dedicated to that part, but the paranormal researchers are identifying what is a measurement of that frequency of a spirit or a soul. So it doesn't have to be just the haunting of the ghost. It could be anybody. It could be me after the passing, what his joyous vibratory index is. That can also be measured through the paranormal studies. The paranormal is something which is out and beyond of normalcy of life. So it's not the scary, spooky side of things, but it's all just studying the whole vibrational index of that space there. Now there are parts of spiritualist belief system, which is a part of physical mediumship, that dictates through table tipping, trumpet chants, transfiguration, and so forth, that can be measured through these paranormal instruments to understand what is the vibrational change, temperature change in the environment. So once again, to reiterate, that scientific process continues to go on and on and on. Is there. So there's another aspect of spirituality, modern day spirituality. And I have sometimes started my conversations in building spirituality, spiritualism, they all are different. If you look up the dictionary, they are not interchangeable words. They have a meaning definition of its own. So spirituality does not have to get mixed up with spiritualism, and spiritualism doesn't have to get mixed up with all things spiritual. So have to have a little mind in studying those four basic definitions that will put perspective always in the right place is there. So the modern day spirituality and the New Age beliefs, I'm just going to put words and phrases there. The first one is not a new modern spirituality. That word has existed eons before I feel spiritualism even come around, and that is reincarnation. That is a construct that always goes there, and as a working medium, we do get questioned a lot. Is my dad back as somebody else? Or what happened to my dog? Is this the cat now? So those type of questions do come around, and that's part, but the curiosity is what's going on. Is the perpetuity of a soul to return in what capacity? So there's an interesting intrigue that goes there. So it's not really defined only to the limits of the reincarnation. It's just the curiosity, what's happening to the soul after. And once again, there are many publications that authors have written their ideas and gathering of information. But I know from my practical journey over 10 some years, that question is something that comes pretty frequently. It rotates. The other part of the modern day spirituality is past life regression. Now past life regression, once again, it touches into that part of our soul or spiritual journey. If you understand quantum physics, this version of joy could be existing in a parallel reality somewhere else, in Ming Dynasty and somewhere in a blue planet. I'm just making it up. But the curiosity becomes playful to seek that out, and past life regression is picking up what the soul has gone through in the previous incarnations. They're not really in tune with the quantum side of parallelness, but it's in the past, just like the word says, past life regression. So when I wrote this down, I was like, I wonder why has nobody picked out what is the future regression? Where the next life regression is. So anybody that would like to patent that idea and work on it, good, more power to you. But my thought is, here's the thought, and that was a quirky little geeky thought in me. If somebody were to see their next life regression, and if they don't like what they're seeing, it's gonna be a really comical quandary or a little stressful quandary for some. I don't want that. So just as the part is, once again, the intrigue of the soul's journey is hard to explain, but it is what it is. Now there's another part of the modern spirituality connected to the spirit or the soul is our ability to astral project ourselves. Being present here and being able to push our spirits and our vibratory index to a higher frequency to go in a different time-space continuum or a different part of the world altogether is there. If you read Autobiography of a Yogi, there are several stories that talk about bilocation or having somebody present before they got to where they were. There are plenty of stories. There are also other case studies on astral projection there. So this is always an intriguing subject because it just makes you go like, huh, this is possible. And I think that's the part of the magic of the soul and spirit's journey is potential is unlimited. Out-of-body experiences. And I had a good experience of few. I don't have all the details to remember by, but it almost feels like my body snaps back together when it's happening. The return of the soul or the spirit is there and so forth. But if you want to study these things are very easily available to study and research and make an understanding that what one facet of our soul or our journey as a spirit can provide us. So have that. The other version of modern day spirituality that connects Can we become guides? Can we become angels? Can we go there? Can we do this or not? And that's another part what I'm bringing up, that is, as an awareness of life after death, is, could there be options when you pass on and you are just suspended in that beautiful place of being a soul or a spirit? Do you have an option? And this has become my sort of personal opinion and dissertation. The soul has a choice. That's one thing that definitely has a choice, what to do with it. The other part of modern day spirituality is aura. Our energy field, our biofield, our spiritual layers that can be seen, visible through plain eye, through spiritual eye, through just feeling, and so on and so forth. But it's, I feel it's a part and parcel of the soul and spirit's journey. So it goes kind of somewhat in a hand in hand, and so forth. Now the other part of the life after death is the ethical and moral implications of what is going on. Once again, the choice has been made here to keep it limited, because these are, once again, there are topics within themselves to be talked in a broader way. So how our conceptual understanding influences or affects our moral and ethical choices. So if I'm using this a very profound example, if you understand the cultures and the belief system that are based on the law of action or karmic laws that are always dictating your actions and choices, are going to tell you where you are going to be next. So that's a motivational space. It's like, oh, I can be better than where I am. Let me do all the good deeds and just go on and so forth. So will they affect or influence our choices that we make on an ongoing life? And that for all of us is saying, you know, we always sometimes reside in our angst is saying there's such thing as karma. I'm pretty sure we all have said or bred that word somewhere in our experiences. Which is saying that, you know, the action co-create to whatever that reality is in that space. The other aspect of this ethical moral implication is the role of afterlife beliefs in preparing and coping with death and loss. And that has been my prime intelligence ever since I've figured out there is something called energy, which I knew as a kid. We had a lot of activities in the home, participating through religion, prayers, etc., where you could feel the uprising and the surge of the energy, and it always kept me curious, and I just knew that something exciting, something is building up here. And I saw that as such, but at the same time, in our culture, Indian culture, there's a lot of emphasis and preparation of passing. Somebody is passing, what to prepare, how to go about things. And these are not just limited to the living wills and the crematory processes and so forth. This is the preparation of the family, the preparation of the minds, and somebody's about to take a journey. There is going to be a lot coming along through this process. So there's a deep sense of knowing and surrender and just being quiet and simple about it. So I've seen in many different variations, but the part that is the same thing continues for me in spiritualism is because it's all about death and dying. It's not about just saying I'm the best medium or I can be a healer and so forth. There's more to the spiritualism than just that. And that is to say, how do we help somebody prepare for the other side? We can talk in day out, but it's then your personal placement of it, how you feel with it. The other thing that I feel is very importantly, I would have to say this, a lot of esoteric astrology or exoteric astrology or any aspects of astrology has been identified through my own experiences that has a allowability or permissibility of preparing for that space. And it's a sensitive, critical task. It's not for everybody, but it has the ability to prepare you to what's coming up. And I've seen through my mentors, they had such a good talent and a soft, gentle way of uplifting the family to get prepared for what the journey may happen. It's only a possibility, but the preparation was so benign and kind that the families would recognize it. And they found peace in it. They found the journey to be more fruitful and bonding and making memories and so forth. So that allowability of that implication is interesting. What we believe in definitely sets tone to how it's going to somewhere be recognized minimum at the time of passing. After passing is a whole different aspect of it. So the next part of the life after death goes through a little topic of criticism and skepticism. And this applies to all. It's not just limited to spiritualism, it applies to everywhere. Because this is an exchange of action versus where we are heading for, the consciousness is merely a product of brain activity and that it ceases after that. That thought is deep and intense to even investigate, is that a reality? I mean, that's a personal space, is all this conversation, but at the same time, opening that thought to say, what is happening to consciousness, where I am at this point. The psychological implications of the same critical and skeptical view is understanding afterlife beliefs as a psychological coping mechanism to deal with grief and loss and the void that our loved ones leave or those that have passed on. How do we cope with it? Is the understanding or the precepts of the afterlife, is that just to bridge that space? I feel it is more than that, and there is more to it than that just one simple statement can say, but it is the premise of the psychological skepticism or critical view for all. It's not just for us as a spiritualist. The challenges to paranormal evidence. It's easy to dismiss an evidence unless you experience it yourself. I kept dismissing it unless that one day I saw that little girl standing over there in the corner of the courtyard. And I kept dismissing evidence till somebody put their hand on my ankles in the middle of the wee hours of the morning, and I knew there was a push on it. So once you become once you become a person that experiences those things, then it's undeniable. Up until then, you can be skeptic or you can be denying all that, but once you have that space, it's there. So the pressure of the spirit sometimes is very profound, and most of the time it is to be acknowledged something is here outside of the norm. The other view of the life after death is personal reflection, because what I'm coming around with this is to just simply say, at the end of the day, what our personal journey is, nobody is living through that journey. We think we understand somebody's shoes, but we haven't walked in them. We haven't experienced what they've gone through. So it's not an easy task to say, I get it. It's just a place where it says, I can empathize, I can relate to it, but I've not been in those shoes. And it never is an easy task for yourself. So when you think about life after death, or you contemplate through your own giftedness or your sensitivity, please at least choose to say, I have to think for myself what makes sense to me. And that's just where I think all of the mediums and the psychics and the healers have gone through that. What is making sense? We're always trying to make sense of where we are. The other part, what I would like to say, at least be open to discussing if something that you're experiencing, this is not about convincing. This is I've learned over my recent few years, it's not my job to convince anybody. My job is to share and just leave it as is. So that open discussion is saying, I don't want you to even accept what I've gone through is real, but I'm sharing my story. And that takes a lot of pain and pinchful debating out of anything. I'm just sharing, and this is my experience. Take it or leave it. It still is my experience, right? If you don't accept that girl on the courtyard, it's all right. But I know what I saw. So in conclusion, as I'm coming around and saying, the mystery of death is an ongoing element, and it may remain like so for the future generations. So if we think we've got it all, we've known everything, so it is. But there's more to be discovered. There's ongoing minds, ongoing brain's going to come, more research, more scientific developments might take place that will have a better ability to even expand on where we are. So that perpetualness will always continue. The other important thing what I found, and this is very real, hands-on, practical thing, I cannot judge because I don't have that need to. And I've learned through that because I'm no different than anybody else out there. But I've learned it's not my place, it doesn't do anything. So I've learned to have the respect for diversity of information, the way they come, the way they want to communicate, the way the afterlife is reaching out the way I'm experiencing death and dying for somebody that is going through that process. It's diverse because once again, it's an individualized process. The act of dying is similar, but the process within it is unique, and it's hard to put your finger on it. So I have to learn over time through my own journey is to accept for just simple as that. And sometimes it gets me in a corner, but I will then realize it's not for me. And I have to just be simple-minded with it. The last thing that I'm wanting to say in conclusion is, this is a continued exploration, the topic of life after death, what goes on beyond the living life or the physical life, is just a recommendation to at least approach it with a relaxed and open mind. You can be a skeptic, but at least be open to the possibilities. I'm a big skeptic. And I'm doing this, and I just know how highly critical I can be of anything, including myself. But at least what I feel, I didn't even realize that I've got that open and relaxed mind to receive what I have to receive. Then I can figure it out after that, what I have to break it down in which way. So if you're approaching this complex aspect of soul and the spirit's journey and your own spiritual trajectory, you can be skeptic. You must develop a relaxed and open mind. Otherwise, we're all stuck in one pathway. So the last sentence that was nowhere but it just was transmitted to me says, there always be more. Which also means is, no matter who you are, where your life journey is, you can be more than that. And that's just what's received, and I'm sharing this with generous heart because it means to a lot of us in this time period. So if you are going through with any sense of limitation or your perceived construct of yourself that this is what it's going to be, then you're defining it as such, but you need to realize there's always more. There's something more. There's everything that can be perceived, then there's still something more in it. So be open to the possibilities. Be vulnerable to what that